we have now moved on in, with a little bit of refinement. We put in our keys. And in putting in our keys, we have our starting key. Awesome. Mind your charts. Okay. So mind your charts. We know that this first key here is the body is going to lead the action. It's going to end at 11. So go back, check your reference, and then the head follows behind. And the head comes up, and there's a breath. I didn't draw on the body at this point. That will be done later. I'm just trying to get the head to the proper place. And then, boop, he looks over, and he's going to look at the machine gun nest. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to start dropping in our in-betweens. And so if we look at our charts, which is right up in here, we're going to see that our break for the head is at 13. Okay. Notice that at 13, the body has stopped moving. Okay. So the body is definitely leading the head and so it'll come to rest at 13. It'll actually fall, or it'll pick up speed, if you will, and it will hit the edge of the chair, and then the head after that will continue, and it'll make it'll rotate as the head bumps into the back. It'll rotate upward so he can take a breath. Stepping through, we can see how the head is going to work. It's going to go all the way up here like that. So the first temptation would be, I'm going to just move this in so you can only see those two keys, and I'll put this right at 13 so you can kind of see where we're going. I'm going to add a new layer. Then temptation would be to just make the head in between up. So we're just going to, where we see these 2 points, we can just say, okay, well, that's going to be our in between up. And yeah, that'll be okay, but it'll just kind of slide up there and look kind of mechanical. So suggestion then would be to not do that, but according to our reference, there's more of an arc. So the head is going to move back like this, and then it's going to come up. So we're going to actually see more of an arc this way. And that's going to feel a little bit better. Okay, same for the shoulders. The shoulders really are going to arc back like this. So the head and the shoulders, the shoulders lead the head, but as the head comes back, it's going to actually start to roll up. And that's going to be right about the breakdown. Knowing that, we're going to have to make sure that we're exaggerating that arc, making sure that arc really reads. And this is where it becomes really important to start to pay attention to that stuff. It's going to make it feel really personalized. It's going to make it feel humanized, if you will, if you're really paying attention to your arcs. If we just do straight lines like this, very mechanical, non-personal, that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm just going to hide that layer. And to expedite this video, we're just going to drop in the breakdown. So on frame 13, we're going to drop down the breakdown. Pop! There it is, my breakdown. So now I can see where the head is going to be. Is it following the arc? Let's move in a little bit closer. Yeah, I think so. There it is. It's going in a little bit. That's doing pretty well. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to drop in other in-between. So now we can see just by looking at the different keys, we'll see that the head actually does start to push that arc. Okay, so it's not going just straight up. It actually is pushing the arc. There's a little flatter arc that head is moving across. So now what we can do is we can actually start to go from our key to our breakdown and start to figure out how that arc is going to go. Pop. So now I'm starting to see how that head is starting to shift up and down. I'll turn off the onion skin. So now we can get to our breakdown. Our breakdown is right here. So we can actually start to see how that character is pulling his head back. Okay, now we can put in another in-between. Okay, so we have an in-between at frame 3 and an in-between at frame 5. So let's pop those guys in there. Pop! So now we can see how that head is starting to drag. Now, I did copy the head. It is a bit of a cheat, but it's going to get us there a little bit faster. But now we can start to see the head is really being pulled forward. And we'll start to lay in the in-betweens over here. We're going to go to 9 and start to lay in the in-betweens on that side. Pop. Now we have 9 in here. So we have 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. You can start to see how it's going. Make sure your onion skinner is on, but you can see that you can see that the action is fairly even as it starts to move by. In this case, it's just being dragged back, but you're going to start to see that arc in there. Okay, and then finally we're going to put our in between at frame 11. Pop. There we go. We can see how that head is starting to move back. The body, if you notice, the body is rotating back. Here, oh, it's easier to see if I'll turn off the onion skinner. We're leaning forward. Body starts to pull the head drags, and we get to the next frame. So now the back just hits the back side. Over the course of this, we're not. Why isn't the rest of the body being drawn and that sort of thing? We have the plane in the foreground, and that's going to cover our action. So we'll be able to see the character actually animate through it. So we won't need to worry about having the rest of his body and stuff. So the plane is right there. So that's going to fall back. And now we're ready to go from our breakdown to our next key. Okay, I'm going to hide the foreground again. So we're at frame 13. Turn on the onion skin. I'm going to drop this guy over. So now we can see how that arc is, we're seeing how that arc is starting to behave. This is going to move up now. Okay. It does need a little bit of more refining. We could pin down some of the drawings, but again, we're just kind of blasting through this so we can get to where we need to go, which is our goal. We just want to see that motion that's in there. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to hit frame 21. That looks like a pretty good in between from breakdown 13 to end key at 29. So let's go and we'll drop that guy in. Pop. There's this one. Again, just for motion. We're seeing that head start to rotate now. Now, some people would say that 13 is a key. It does have a different sense of motion to it, but it's like a flat arc that starts to go upward. So I'm going to continue to call it a break or a breakdown. So now all we have to do is we can just start stepping through and adding the frames that we need to add. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to animate to my breakdown. So I have my breakdown to the next in between on 21. So I'm going to find, I think 17 would be the good next step. So we got 17. I'm going to turn off my onion skin tool real quick. So we can see we have some size, proportions issues, and that sort of thing. But we're just trying to get that motion in there. And really what this is about is trying to get in the simple stuff. And then you can come back in, you can refine it. It would get refined more if we're going to clean up. We're not going to clean this up. We want to just make sure that we're getting that motion in there. So now all we have to do is lay in frame 15, which would be right here. And that's going to show us between 13, which is our break, to 15, which is that green. We can just go, or to 17, 17, which is the green, and then we're going to go and get 15, which is the end. Pop! So now we can see, using the onion skin tool, we can see how that character's head is starting to pop in there. We can see the blue, which was our previous frame. We can see the green, which is the future frame. So we can see that head starting to rise. If you want to turn off onion skin at this point, so you can see it starting to rise. So this is really rolling. We're actually just rolling. If you imagine the paper, you're rolling through your paper, you can actually see the head is being pulled back. You're rolling through. Now all we have to do is we add in an in-between. We'll have arrived at our next key. Okay, so we just need this in-between, and we'll get to our next key at 21. Pop. There's another one. Again, a little bit of refinement needs to happen to make sure that it's in proportion. I hate those goggles. I really draw those goggles a little too fast, and so I'm going to have to go back over the goggles and make sure that they're in right perspective and that kind of thing. But for the time being, head drags, head starts to come up, he starts to take a breath, and his head gets rises. Now all we have to do is have it rotate over. Okay, it's not going to be pulled back any further, but it's just going to rotate from the base of the skull upward. Okay, and then we'll get into our next key, which is marked off. All right, so now let's just find the midpoint here. Basically, it's breaking down my in-betweens, but we can just find that midpoint